The impact gun rattled against the concrete floor before Brandon Carter caught it with the toe of his worn leather boot. "Careful with that," a customer muttered, stepping back from the service bay. The shop was already packed. Rows of polished Camaros, Chargers, Mustangs, and custom imports lined the lot outside Performance Edge Customs. Music rolled across the parking area, while vendors set up tents for the annual Charlotte car meet. Inside, the service bays stayed open, turning last-minute jobs around before the crowd wandered through. Brandon slid beneath a black Corvette on the lift, tightened the final suspension bolt, and rolled himself out. "You done?" Service advisor Dana Brooks leaned over her clipboard. He wiped his hands with a rag. Torx checked twice. She smiled, figured. Before she could print the invoice, Tyler Donnelly wandered over, adjusting the clean shop shirt he'd managed to keep spotless all morning. "Keys?" Tyler asked. Dana hesitated. Brandon simply tossed them over. The customer approached just as Tyler caught the key fob. "She's ready," Tyler said with an easy grin. "We had to fine-tune the suspension geometry." Brandon looked at the floor instead of the customer. The man nodded, impressed. "Drives better than ever." Tyler accepted the compliment without blinking. Dana opened her mouth, then closed it again. From the office doorway came the booming voice everyone recognized. "There he is." Mike Donnelly, everyone called him Big Mike, walked across the shop floor carrying a coffee cup like he owned the building. His polo stretched across his broad shoulders, and his knees looked stiff with every step. He slapped Tyler on the back. "Knew you could handle it." Tyler grinned. Mike glanced toward Brandon. "You finished with that? Good. Bay 3 needs oil changes stacked up." Brandon nodded once. "No argument." "No sigh." He grabbed his dented red toolbox and wheeled it toward the next bay. One drawer stuck halfway before sliding shut with the familiar metal scrape. Outside, someone called his name. "Dad." Malik jogged through the open garage door, backpack hanging off one shoulder. Brandon's face softened. "You made it." "Told Coach I'd be late." Malik looked around the shop, taking everything in. The lifts, polished cars, display banners, photographers gathering outside. "This place is bigger than I thought." Brandon smiled faintly. "Stay where customers are walking." Before Malik could answer, Mike appeared again. "So this your boy?" Malik offered his hand. "Yes, sir." Mike shook it quickly. "Good timing. You'll get to see what real work looks like." Brandon caught the tone but stayed quiet. The afternoon rush swallowed the bays. Engines started. Compressors hissed. Customers drifted inside, asking questions about builds on display. One of the temporary cleanup workers hurried through carrying a heavy rolling grease collection barrel. Its front wheel caught an air hose. The barrel tipped. Black grease poured across the concrete, spreading beneath two lifts before stopping near Brandon's boots. The cleanup worker froze. "I'm sorry." Mike spun around at the sound. His eyes landed on the mess. Then on Brandon. "Carter." Brandon looked up. "Handle it." The cleanup worker raised his hand. "Mr. Donnelly, it was Mike cut him off. "I wasn't talking to you." Dana stepped forward carefully. "I can call maintenance from the event crew." Mike shook his head. "They're busy." He looked straight at Brandon. "Grab the absorbent and clean every bit of it." Brandon glanced toward the line forming at Bay 3. "The oil changes." "They'll wait." The shop had floor scrubbers. It had spill equipment. It even had the cleanup crew standing 20 feet away. Mike ignored all of it. He folded his arms. "Unless those boots are too nice to get dirty." A few people nearby laughed. Brandon bent without saying anything. He scattered absorbent across the grease, then dropped onto one knee with a scraper. The black sludge stained his gloves almost instantly. Malik stood frozen near the waiting area, His eyes moved from his father to Tyler. Tyler leaned against the finished Corvette, laughing with two guests as though nothing unusual was happening. One of them looked toward Brandon. Thought he was one of the mechanics. Tyler shrugged. Everybody starts somewhere. Dana stared at the floor. She wanted to say something. Instead, she handed another customer an invoice. Brandon pushed the scraper slowly across the concrete, gathering thick ribbons of grease into a collection pan. His old boots disappeared beneath black streaks. Someone snapped pictures of the cars only a few feet away, carefully framing Brandon out of every shot. When he finally looked up, Malik wasn't watching the cars anymore. He was watching him. Before Brandon could stand, a sharp whistle sounded from outside. A security volunteer hurried through the entrance. He looked directly toward the office. Big Mike. Mike turned. What? The guest of honor just pulled in. Mike's expression changed immediately. Marcus Reed's here already. The entire shop stopped moving for a moment. Big Mike wiped his hands on a clean microfiber towel before stepping into the parking lot. A black performance SUV had just stopped beside the display area. Cameras turned in the same direction as people drifted closer, phones already raised. Marcus Reed climbed out wearing jeans, a team jacket, and a Charlotte baseball cap pulled low. Mike's smile came easily. Marcus, glad you could make it. We've got your car staged up front. Marcus shook his hand once, then looked past him toward the open service bays. Where's Brandon Carter? Mike blinked. He's tied up in the shop. I'll wait. No need, Tyler's been heading up the build. Tyler stepped forward, extending his hand. Good to finally meet you. Marcus nodded politely, but didn't take it. I asked for Brandon. The conversation around them quieted. Mike forced a laugh. Brandon handles routine service. Tyler's our performance guy. Marcus looked at him for a second, as if deciding whether he'd heard correctly. Routine service. That's right. Marcus glanced toward the garage again. Then somebody's confused. Mike shifted his weight. Your Camaro's right over. I'm not here for the Camaro. That stopped him. Marcus pointed toward the shop. I brought another car. A covered trailer rolled in behind the SUV. Two crew members carefully lowered the ramp. People nearby edged closer. Dana watched from inside the office window before walking outside with a clipboard she no longer needed. Mike recovered quickly. We'll get Tyler on it. Marcus shook his head. I don't let anyone else touch that engine. Tyler frowned. It's just a tune-up, right? Marcus finally looked at him. What cam profile is in it? Tyler hesitated. There are different setups. Marcus waited. Tyler searched for an answer. Mike stepped in. We'd have to check the paperwork. Marcus folded his arms. The guy who built it wouldn't need paperwork. Silence settled between them. Across the garage, Brandon rinsed grease from his gloves at the utility sink. He hadn't looked outside. Malik stood beside him. You know him. Brandon kept washing. We've worked together. Malik frowned. You never said. Brandon reached for another rag. It never came up. Outside, Mike lowered his voice. Marcus, Brandon helps around here, but Tyler manages the performance work. Marcus looked genuinely puzzled. That's not what Brandon told me. He talks to you. We've spent weekends together in his garage. Dana's head turned. Mike's smile disappeared for just a moment. Marcus continued. My engine dropped a valve 2 years ago. 3 builders couldn't fix it. He nodded toward the service bays. Brandon rebuilt it. Several customers within earshot exchanged looks. One older man spoke quietly. Carter. Marcus nodded. He machines everything himself. Tyler looked toward the shop. You've got a machine shop? No. Then where's? Marcus answered without hesitation. His garage. Dana stared through the open bay doors. The dented red toolbox sat exactly where Brandon had left it. Mike cleared his throat. Well, today he's occupied. I noticed. Marcus looked past him. He's cleaning grease. Nobody answered. Dana looked down. Marcus took a slow breath. I drove 3 hours because Brandon asked me to stop by before my charity event next week. Mike's eyes narrowed. He invited you? No. Marcus smiled faintly. I called him. Dana finally spoke. I can go get him. Mike turned sharply. Stay here. She didn't move. Marcus asked for Brandon. I heard him. Mike started toward the garage. Dana watched him go, then looked back at Marcus. He rebuilt your race engine. Marcus nodded. And the backup. She let out a quiet breath. I wondered. For what? Why certain customers always asked whether Brandon was working before they'd schedule. Marcus smiled. Now you know. Inside, Mike reached Brandon before he could leave the sink. Finish cleaning yourself up. Brandon nodded. And stay in the back. Brandon looked at him. Mike lowered his voice. I'll handle this. Brandon picked up a clean towel without answering. Before Mike could turn away, Dana walked into the bay. Marcus Reed says he won't discuss the project with anyone except Brandon. Mike stared at her. She met his eyes for the first time that day without looking away. Outside, Marcus checked his watch. I've got about 20 minutes. He looked toward the garage entrance. If Brandon isn't available, I'll take my business somewhere else. Brandon dried his hands on a clean shop towel before walking out of the service bay. Marcus met him halfway across the floor. There you are. They shook hands without fanfare. Sorry to keep you waiting, Brandon said. Marcus glanced at the grease still darkening Brandon's boots. I've seen worse. The tension around them shifted. Customers who had been pretending to browse now openly watched. Marcus motioned toward the enclosed trailer. Mind taking a look? Brandon nodded. The trailer door lifted to reveal a silver late-model Camaro, with a race number still taped to the rear window. Brandon walked around it once without touching anything. When did the vibration start? Marcus smiled. Second lap after Talladega. You changed the rear gear afterward. Marcus's crew chief answered before Marcus could. 390 to 410. Brandon crouched beside the rear wheel. Put the old ratio back before replacing parts. The crew chief looked surprised. You haven't even started it. You don't need to. Marcus laughed quietly. I told you. Mike stepped closer. We can get it on a lift. Brandon stood. I don't need one yet. Marcus looked at Mike. This is why I came. Mike forced another smile that didn't reach his eyes. Just then Dana hurried from the office carrying a stack of envelopes. Mike. He barely looked at her. What? Precision Coatings is here. So? They won't unload. A delivery driver stood near the loading dock with crossed arms. I've got instructions, he called. No parts until the overdue invoices are handled. Several employees glanced toward Mike. We've always paid them, Tyler muttered. Dana answered without raising her voice. Not the last 3. Mike walked toward the driver. I'll call accounting. The driver shook his head. I already spoke with accounting. There is no accounting. Mike stopped. The owner told us to deliver only after payment. The driver climbed back into his truck. We'll try again next week. The truck pulled away. Tyler looked confused. We needed those wrap materials. No kidding, Mike snapped. Before anyone answered, a man in his 60s entered through the front office carrying a leather portfolio. Dana recognized him first. Mr. Whitaker. The conversations around the shop faded. Richard Whitaker rarely visited in person. He owned the building, the business, and 3 other automotive properties across North Carolina. Mike straightened immediately. I wasn't expecting you. I know. Whitaker looked around the busy shop. I figured I'd stop by. His eyes settled briefly on the empty loading dock. I just passed your supplier leaving. Mike answered quickly. Small misunderstanding. Whitaker gave a short nod but said nothing. Instead, he walked toward Marcus. Glad you made it. Marcus shook his hand. Good to see you. Whitaker noticed Brandon standing beside the trailer. You two know each other. Marcus smiled. I know the only mechanic I trust with this car. Whitaker looked at Brandon a moment longer than expected. I've heard that more than once today. Before Brandon could answer, another customer approached Dana's counter. I've got a question. Dana looked up. Sure. If Brandon's booked next week, I'd rather wait another month. A second customer overheard. Same here. Within seconds, 2 more voices joined in. I only book with Brandon. So do I. Tyler frowned. They've never asked before. Dana opened Brandon's appointment calendar on the computer. They ask every time. Mike shot her a look. She kept typing. Whitaker watched the exchange without interrupting. His attention drifted to Brandon's old red toolbox sitting beside Bay 3. The corners were scarred, the paint faded, but every wrench rested in its place. You've kept that thing a long time, Whitaker said. Brandon smiled slightly. Long enough to know where everything is. Whitaker nodded once. So I've heard. He turned toward Mike. We'll need to talk before I leave. Mike answered quickly. Of course. Whitaker glanced back at Brandon. I'd like you there too. The shop suddenly felt much quieter. Mike's jaw tightened. Brandon looked from Whitaker to Marcus, then toward Malik waiting near the office door. Nobody knew what the meeting was about. But for the first time all afternoon, Mike wasn't the one deciding who stayed and who left. Richard Whitaker didn't ask anyone to follow him into the office. Instead, he stopped near the front counter where customers, vendors, and employees could all hear without straining. We don't need privacy, he said evenly. Mike forced a chuckle. Richard, maybe we should. We'll do it here. The room settled. Whitaker looked first at Marcus Reed. You said Brandon rebuilt your engine. Marcus nodded. He did the machining, balancing, assembly, everything. I recommended him to 2 other drivers after that. One of Marcus's crew members added, we still call Brandon when something doesn't make sense. Whitaker turned to Brandon. Did you ever advertise that work through this shop? No. Did you use shop equipment? No. Did you take customers from the business? No. Brandon's answers came without hesitation. Whitaker nodded once. I didn't think so. Mike stepped forward. Richard, Brandon's a good mechanic. Nobody's arguing that. No. Whitaker looked toward Dana. You've been here 6 years. Almost 7. When customers asked for Brandon, what happened? Dana glanced briefly at Mike before answering. They were usually reassigned. By whom? Mike. Mike folded his arms. I distribute work. Dana continued. Some customers insisted on waiting. Whitaker asked, did Brandon ever tell them to? No. She reached beneath the counter and pulled out a spiral notebook. I kept a list. Mike frowned. A list of what? People who asked specifically for Brandon. She laid the notebook on the counter. Names filled page after page. Dates, phone numbers, notes like we'll wait for Brandon. Whitaker flipped through it quietly. You've been tracking this. Dana nodded. It made scheduling easier. Mike shook his head. That's not official. No, Dana replied, but it's accurate. Tyler stepped in. This doesn't prove anything. Marcus looked at him. It proves people know quality. Tyler opened his mouth, then stopped. A voice came from the waiting area. He's right. The owner of the black Corvette from earlier raised his hand. I thought Tyler worked on my suspension. He looked toward Brandon. You did, didn't you? Brandon answered simply. Yes. The customer laughed once. I had a feeling. Another customer spoke up. He rebuilt my transmission last year. So did mine. I've always dealt with Brandon. The comments weren't loud. They didn't need to be. Each one landed in the silence that followed. Whitaker closed Dana's notebook. Then he looked at Mike. I've also reviewed vendor reports. Mike's expression tightened. The late invoices. The unpaid invoices. I was handling them. You weren't. Whitaker reached into his portfolio and removed several printed emails. I was copied after suppliers stopped getting responses. Mike didn't answer. I also received complaints about canceled appointments that were never canceled in our system. Dana lowered her eyes. Whitaker continued. Brandon corrected several scheduling conflicts before customers arrived. Mike looked toward Brandon. You've been going around me. Brandon met his eyes. No. He stayed late, Dana said quietly. He fixed them after closing. Mike stared at her. You could have told me. I did. The words hung there. You said to stop bothering you with office problems. Nobody spoke. Whitaker took a slow breath. I hired you to manage this shop. Mike looked exhausted for the first time that day. I know. You stopped managing it. Outside, another group of visitors wandered in from the car meet, unaware of the conversation unfolding. Marcus checked the time. I've got one more thing. Everyone turned toward him. I came today because I'm expanding my charity racing program. He looked directly at Whitaker. I want one shop handling every engine. Mike straightened instinctively. Marcus kept talking. The agreement only works if Brandon oversees the builds. The words settled over the room. No one interrupted. Whitaker looked at Brandon. Then at Mike. Finally, he spoke. Mike, I'm removing you from day-to-day management, effective immediately. Mike didn't argue. He simply looked around the shop floor. The customers, Dana behind the counter, Tyler standing speechless, and Brandon beside the old red toolbox. Whitaker turned toward Brandon. I need an answer before this event ends. Brandon didn't respond right away. Every eye in the building was on him. Brandon looked around the shop before answering. Employees had stopped working. Customers stood shoulder to shoulder near the front counter. Even the music from the car meet outside seemed farther away. He faced Richard Whitaker. If you're asking whether I'll help the shop, yes. Whitaker nodded. I'm asking if you'll run it. Brandon took a moment. I'll run the operation. He looked toward the service bays. But I still plan to turn wrenches. A few mechanics exchanged quiet smiles. Whitaker extended his hand. Then you start today. Brandon shook it. There was no applause. Just the steady sound of air compressors cycling back on, as people slowly returned to what they'd come there to do. Marcus stepped forward, carrying a slim folder from his crew chief. This is the proposal. Whitaker accepted it. Marcus continued, 6 race engines over the next 12 months, maintenance between events. Future projects if everything goes well. Whitaker looked at Brandon. You'll have final say on the technical work. Brandon nodded once. That's fair. Marcus smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Across the room, Tyler quietly removed his shop gloves and set them on the counter. He looked at Brandon. I guess I never thanked you. Brandon frowned slightly. For what? The times you fixed my mistakes without saying anything. Brandon answered honestly. We all miss things. Tyler lowered his eyes. I missed a lot. Without another word, he walked toward the employee lockers. Mike remained where he was. His coffee cup still rested on the counter, untouched. Whitaker approached him. I'll have payroll process everything through today. Mike nodded. I understand. There wasn't much else to say. He picked up a small box from the office and began clearing framed certificates and personal items from the wall. Nobody watched for long. The workday kept moving. Dana slid behind the service counter again, opening the appointment system. She looked toward Brandon. Tomorrow's schedule is full. He walked over. Anyone been waiting longer than 2 weeks? She clicked through the calendar. 3 customers. Move them to the morning. She smiled. I already did. He laughed quietly. I figured. Near the garage entrance, Malik stood beside Brandon's old red toolbox. He ran a finger across one of the dents. You've had this forever. Long time. You ever think about buying a new one? Brandon looked at it. It still does its job. Malik nodded. So do you. It wasn't said loudly. Brandon looked at his son for a second before resting a hand on his shoulder. Outside, Marcus's crew rolled the Camaro toward Bay 1. Several visitors followed, curious to watch. One of the photographers from earlier approached Dana. Mind if we get a picture of Brandon with the car? Dana looked toward Brandon. He was already pulling on fresh gloves. Only if you don't mind waiting. The photographer laughed. For what? He said he'd look at the rear gear first. Marcus grinned. I told you. Brandon rolled his red toolbox across the concrete. The familiar drawer caught halfway before sliding shut with its usual scrape. He stopped beside the Camaro and knelt to inspect the rear suspension. The same worn leather boots that had been covered in grease an hour earlier settled onto the clean shop floor. No one laughed this time. Customers lined up near Dana's counter, not asking for the fastest appointment or the cheapest estimate. One after another, they asked the same question. When's Brandon available? Dana entered each name into the schedule. By the time she finished, Brandon's calendar stretched weeks ahead. As the afternoon sun settled across the open garage doors, Malik watched his father disappear beneath Marcus Reed's car with the same quiet focus he'd had all day. The difference wasn't in Brandon. It was in the way everyone else had finally started seeing the work he'd been doing all along.